Just a reminder, Salesforce is a publicly traded company, so please base your purchasing decisions on current products and services and not on any forward-looking statements that we may be making today. Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Lee, Lead Admin Evangelist at Salesforce. So if this is your first episode, Automate This is a monthly series showcasing trailblazers like you doing some amazing things with automation. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. So if you've built screen flows, you're going to go wild over these new enhancements. I played with some of them while working on my release highlights blog, and screen flows are they have definitely come a long way, and it's exciting to see these really cool enhancements. So if you're new to screen flows, it's a great time to start learning about these new features that you'll be able to use. So just a reminder, the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on the live stream episode page. You'll get an email reminder the day of the event. And to interact live during the live stream, post your questions in the chat. Interact with other viewers, and to engage me and my guest presenters, start your question with a Q colon so that we can quickly scan through and identify and answer your questions during the Q&A section. All right, so in today's episode, you will learn all about the Summer 24 enhancements for screen flows. And we're going to do a deep dive into repeaters and action buttons, and you'll get a sneak peek into Einstein for Flow. And we're going to give you a glimpse into what's coming up in the near future roadmap. All right, so I am super excited to be joined by product managers of ScreenFlows at Salesforce, Sam Reynard and Adam White. Sam Reynard is the Senior Director of Product Management, and Adam is the Product Management Director. So they're going to showcase all the amazing Summer 24 ScreenFlow enhancements coming to your production org soon. And after you watch this episode, get your hands on a Summer 24 pre-release org or a sandbox and test out these features. So welcome to you both.
Thanks, Jen. Excited to be here.
Thanks, Jen. Exciting to be here.
All right. So before we get into it, as product managers, how do you determine what features you're going to work on in an upcoming release?
That's a good question. It's really a combination of a ton of different things. We like to take a look at what is going on in the market, what cool things other products might be building, or other ways that building UI well is being done, as well as taking in insights from customers like you. And then sometimes it is a little bit of there's something big going on at Salesforce and we need to participate in that larger theme, such as, Einstein, which has been happening lately for a lot of teams. I know, Adam, do you want to add any other tidbits?
Yeah, it's a tricky balance. We have a lot of stakeholders, and we have internal teams building on Flow. We've got executives that want to move the company in a certain direction. We've got feedback that we've got to listen to and deliver on. So it's a tricky balance, I'll just say. So we try to get a mix of good, meaty, big features and try to address little paper cuts along the way.
So I know it's hard to pick because all the features you work on are like your children, right? You can't really have a favorite, but I know you do. So I'm going to ask the question anyways. What is by far the most favorite feature you've delivered and why?
You go first, Sam.
I was going to tag you. Um, I think probably my favorite that I have shipped is the sections and columns feature. Because that was something that even before I was a PM for Flow, I had heard up and down and sideways how much people really needed it. And it was something that you could immediately see just the impact of a really simple adjustment to your flow that unfortunately was not a simple thing for us to build. It took like a year for us to put it together and actually ship it to everyone. But even like now to see that it's kind of a like assumed part of how people build flows is really encouraging to see that we made a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would say for me, it's a tough choice, right? Because the things I've been involved with are like data table and operator. There's been a lot of cool stuff that I brought from my experience in the field that I really wanted to see in Flow. But I'd have to say what I'm about to show today is probably my favorite. So screen actions or action buttons, as it will manifest itself in this release, because we have some really cool stuff planned on the horizon with these screen actions. And it's one of the cool things that I got to see from the very beginning, from designing it all the way to the end. And it took a very long time to deliver. It was a big technological hurdle that we had to get over to make this possible. So I think screen actions are probably my all-time favorite. Just what it allows people to do from a screen perspective without any code.
Right.
It's quite cool.
I'm surprised that you're not picking one of your Three Musketeer features, Adam.
I know. I should pick data table. I should, but screen actions are just so cool.
They are.
It's nothing else can really come close to this.
They are really taking screens to the next level, which I feel like we say with every new feature that we add. And then we're just raising the bar higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
I have to say, it was a game changer a few releases ago when you release reactivity.
Yep.
And not having to build so many screens, because now on that same screen, based on whatever the user is doing, other things are said or happen or whatnot. So that was huge.
So reactivity is like one of those platform level things that I struggle to call it a feature because it's so foundationally changing the way that you build flows. Like these screen actions would not be possible without reactivity. And so sure, I guess technically reactivity would be my favorite overall feature, but it's almost like too big to call a feature in some ways.
Yeah. Just everything Adam touches is an awesome feature.
I try.
All right. So for those who watched Flow Release Readiness Live yesterday on Salesforce Plus, we got a teaser of these features. So super excited to have both of you deep dive into those Summer 24 ScreenFlow features today with demos. So we're going to start off with Sam. She's going to bat first. So what are you going to share with us, Sam?
Got two things to show you. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about repeaters. So if you were watching Flow Release Readiness Live yesterday, I'll show you the same runtime experience, but this time I will get into the weeds on how that flow was built, which I know is the big gap from yesterday's show, but there just truly was not enough time. But first, I'm going to kick us off with a really short section about Einstein for Flow, because I know a lot of people are really interested in hearing about that.
Great. All right. Well, have you get started.
All right. Let's get into it. So if you watched RL yesterday, all of this will be repeat information for you. So just stay with me for the next couple of minutes, and then we'll get into some new stuff. Einstein for Flow is going to be launched as a beta in June. It's going to be released as a patch as part of Summer 24. So keep your eye on the release notes, and I'm sure there will be some kind of launch information when it is live. important thing is this will be available only if you have the Einstein One platform sales or service add-ons, but it will just show up if you have those add-ons as part of the beta. The power of Einstein for Flow is really getting you started and getting past that blank canvas syndrome by leveraging what we know tons of other flows that have been built by other flow experts and team members and customers. So I'm going to get us into the demo right now, but currently we have supported both custom and standard objects will be a part of the beta. And the idea is just tell us a little bit about what you want to be built. And actually I say a little bit, but like as much detail as possible. So we have this new experience when you are choosing what kind of flow you want to build, and we want to have Einstein help you build. There is a lot of information here about the kinds of things that will be useful for your prompt, but just the more information, the better. One thing that I really like about how they built this was they have a nice like couple of example prompts that will pre-fill it in here, and then you can make adjustments so you get an idea of the kind of prompt that we are looking for. That's not what I wanted. Let me go and find the prompt that I should have copied before I started this. Right, so what we are going to do here is have Einstein create a screen flow that collects new opportunity information and then creates an opportunity record with that information. But we are specifying exactly the information we want to capture. So we want the name, we want to look up the parent account, we want the opportunity amount, and the progress state of the opportunity. So as I click Create Draft Flow, the Einstein for Flow code gen model is running in the background and trying to generate a flow that meets our prompt based on what information I put into the prompt and leveraging other flows that it knows about. The wording draft flow is very purposeful. Like, this is not intended to build a flow and be activatable automatically. We expect this to be a starting point for you to kind of lay out how a flow like that is intended to be built. And it is currently meant for pretty simple flows. They say 3 to 6 elements. Most of the examples that we've seen in demos have been 2. This .composer Einstein is telling us what it did, but I'm going to collapse that for now as we go. And the first step that we should be doing is checking what Einstein built for me. So we have a screen that is collecting the opportunity name, the account, the close date, the stage name, and the stages. It looks like it generated a pick list choice set for me based on stage name and the amount, and most of them have been set to required. And then it is creating an opportunity with all of the information it got from that screen and mapping into what looks like the right fields to me. And then I could take further steps, and maybe I decide I want to make that lookup be required, or I want to collect additional information or do other things with the information that was collected. That is definitely up to you. Highly recommend that once you check that everything is how you expect it to be, come back and give the feedback to Einstein about whether it was a good flow it generated or it didn't meet your needs, and the specifics about why it didn't meet your needs. And this is how we're going to make that product better over time. Anyway, so that is a wrap for me on Einstein for Flow. Looking forward to your questions about that. Just a note that we are not the Einstein for Flow experts, so we will do our best to answer your questions, but we may ask you to take some of them to the Trailblazer community so we can get the right experts involved. But I'm going to spend the rest of today talking to you about repeaters. If you haven't heard about repeaters, it is a way to collect multiple records or sets of information that have all the same fields in them, where previously you would have had to build a section or a screen that was capturing that information and then loop the user back to that screen over and over and over again until you collected all of the things. Instead, we're going to let you keep your user on the same screen. They keep all of their context. We give you a container component that has the remove and add functionality, just like you're seeing on the right here. This release with Summer 24, repeaters are GA. We're really excited to bring it out of the beta for you, as well as to bring a lot more functionality. So now with the GA in Summer 24, everything that shows up in the components tab, with one exception, is supported in a repeater. Actually, I'm going to say two exceptions. So you can't put a section inside of a repeater. That is something we're thinking about with like multi-column support. And we also don't yet support action buttons, but with those two exceptions, everything that shows up in your components tab, so that's like lookup, that was specifically asked for by a lot of customers, toggle, email, data table, slider, file upload, any custom component that you install from Unofficial SF or App Exchange, or someone builds in your org for your specific use, those will all be supported in repeaters. We also spent a lot of time making sure that the screen features that you're accustomed to using for other components are going to work when you're inside of a repeater. So it means conditional visibility. You can have components inside the repeater be conditionally visible, or the whole container. And then any components that otherwise support help text and input validation, that is supported inside of the repeater as well. And reactivity, you can have the one-to-one field binding where one component has a reference to the other. You can build a reactive formula, and then the repeater can consume that reactive formula. The one piece that is not yet there is the ability to take the outputs of something that's in a repeater and build a reactive formula that uses those outputs. That's going to be a bit of time before we're able to resolve that for you. And one best practice I would love for you all to take in before we move into demo is the runtime API versions. There's a lot of features that we have that are, or big enhancements that are behind runtime API versions, because we don't want to accidentally break your implementations. This one is for improved performance of your screens. It's going to be a benefit to anybody who is building screen flows to get your runtime API version up to at least 58 for this performance enhancement, but especially if you're using a repeater that has choices in it, you might hit some performance issues, and that's where support is going to recommend you bring your flow up to at least 58. But, reactivity is under 59, so we actually recommend you get to as close to the latest version as possible, but we know that is work for you. All right, that is my big summary of repeaters, so let's actually get into this demo. So here I've built a screen flow that is collecting information to generate a new auto insurance policy as a quick action on the contact object. I am pulling in some contextual information here. You'll hear about disabled states that's new from Adam later today, but this is just giving us the context of the policyholder and the state that this insurance policy will be added to. And then I have two repeater components, because for each insurance policy, I need to capture all the vehicles that need to be insured and all the drivers that need to be insured. And so we have here a dependent pick list. So this is one of those components that is newly supported this release. And you'll notice as soon as I enter the model, then we have conditional visibility applying to then display a bunch of other components. I'm going to say we are blue, we're going to be 2020, and I also have to go and copy a VIN number because they are so long. Lost my mouse. Let's see. All right, so we've got a VIN, and then I'm going to add a driver really quick. I'm just going to show you also our input validation that is working. So I purposely put in a bad VIN here. The VIN is expecting something that's at least 17 characters long. And so our input validation caught both that, as well as that this birth date that I put in is not 16 years old, which is going to be a requirement to be insured. So I'm going to correct those guys, 1989. And I'm actually going to add another vehicle, say Subaru Impreza, oops, gray, and 2000. And then I'll add one other driver here. So we'll get Lauren's partner. Okay. So as I click next, behind the scenes, the flow is processing the repeater, which is something I'll go over in the configuration. And then I added this review screen that allows us to just get a final take on all the data that was entered. So we have some contextual information about like the service address and the policyholder. But most importantly, I passed the results of those repeaters into two data tables. So we have all the vehicles that were added and all the drivers that were added. All this looks good to me, so I'm going to click submit. Now we have a local action that is taking us to the car insurance policy record that was created by the flow, and we see the 2 vehicles and the 2 drivers were added. And that local action is, I promise, the only bit of code being used in this demo. It just takes us to the record very nicely. Let's actually take a look at how we use repeaters in this flow. So I'm going to give you a quick review of how you add a repeater component and the components inside of it to a screen. To find repeater, it's under the display section in the components list. And so I added it to the bottom here. And now any component that is in your component list, with the exception of action button and section, as I mentioned, I can just drag in here and then I will configure it as I would have usually. So most of this looks the same. I'm actually going to walk you through some of the existing configuration that I have to show you a couple of things. VIN is the most interesting here because it has conditional visibility and input validation and help text applied. So I'm going to walk you through this. Right, so we give it a label, an API name as usual. We have the conditional visibility is set to show up only when the dependent pick list second pick list has a value. So let me walk you through how that would actually be built. So because I am inside of this repeater, I type vehicle, I have access to the other components that are siblings inside of that repeater. So we have vehicle make model, which is what I'm going to pick. We have color, we have last smog check, we have year, and we have VIN. There's also some other stuff that's showing up that's outside of the repeater, like vehicles and instructional text and all the usual pieces. But what's really important to understand, I'm going to set this to show up only when model is not null. So I was picking pick list 2 value is null, false. If I were to try to reference in the component visibility or in just these resources, those same components when I'm outside of the repeater, you'll notice that all those vehicle components are not available. And that's because make, color, last smog check, year, VIN are only available when you are inside of its container. So that's just one scoping detail here. And then within validate input, I have kind of similar thing going on where I'm checking is the length of my same value of vehicle.VIN. Is it 17? That's the exact thing that we want for a VIN. And then provide help. I didn't put any clever references or anything in here, but this is just useful information about where to find your VIN number. All right, so that is kind of the big picture things you need to know about when you're building your repeater component in your screen. Once you get through the screen, the repeater output is a data structure that only makes sense inside of the flow. So what you need to do is convert it to the right data structure if you want to create records with it. And it's up to you. You can convert it into like an S-object collection or an apex-defined collection, depending on if you're trying to send it to Salesforce or send it to an external system. I'm going to walk us through the process of building the process for drivers. So I've cleared out a bunch of this stuff here. When we're going to loop over the drivers that came out of the that screen. So when I come into my intake insurance details screen, I can see we have these 2 repeaters. I'm going to grab drivers and then select all items. This is a collection that is all of the items that were entered by the user at runtime. So now I have a loop variable available. What I'm doing here is mapping to a temporary driver, which is a record variable. I'm going to map the values from the repeater into this temporary variable. And then in the next step, I'm going to add that temporary variable to a collection so that I can use that to create records and display in that data table downstream. So some things that I've done already is pass in some global references. So this is things that came from the context record of the state that was licensed in, or the insurance policy record that I created to attach these vehicles and drivers to earlier in the flow. But the thing that I wanted to map out for you specifically was grabbing the values from the loop. So I type in drivers just to make sure that this is the current item from the drivers loop. And here I have values for each of the components that are in that repeater that I created earlier. So we have first name, last name, license ID, and date of birth. So I'm going to map each of those to the correct fields. Drivers dot date of birth. Drivers dot license. Okay. And just to show you that you can do a little extra, I'm going to also do the same within a formula. This is to provide a nice resolved name for the driver records. I want it to be a combination of the first and last names. So I'm going to call this driver name concatenated, make this a text formula, and then similar to what I was doing in that assignment, you can find the right loop variable, grab first name, grab last name, and then add some simple concatenation logic, which hopefully that was correct because I can never remember my formula syntax. Right, so then the last step, as I mentioned before, now that we've mapped all the values from the repeater instance into the loop variable, into the temporary variable, is look at our, I created a drivers collection, and we're going to add that temporary driver variable there. So when this loop is finished, I will have a collection of drivers that Salesforce database understands. And so this Chris, where I've added the drivers to the policy, I've passed in that collection, and that is how the results actually get handled. And working a little bit backwards here, went a little bit out of order. I did the same inside of this data table where I added the drivers collection to the data table and chose a few columns to display as that final review option. Right, so that is a wrap on my demo, but I wanted to end with a little bit of a view towards the future of what else we're thinking of doing for repeaters. As always, we love hearing from you, especially in idea exchange with like use cases for what you would like to accomplish, but this is just a view to like what we are thinking. We are here right now, so we have released repeaters. It is focused on the ability to create net new records dynamically in the screen. What we're working on right now is allowing you to do that, but for updating records. So pre-populating a repeater with existing data and mapping it all in so that, and then being able to differentiate of like, I want to do updates to these, the removed items could be archived or the records be deleted, however you want to handle that. Moving down the line a bit into more configuration opportunities, we are thinking about adding support for columns and headers, as well as making that loop process a lot easier by supporting transforms so that you could do all of that in a single node instead, and the ability to customize button labels. And then we're thinking about, how to incorporate action buttons into repeaters, as well as pre-populating external data, not just us record data from Salesforce, and things like easier validation with min and max. But we'd love to hear from you. That's a wrap for me. Jen, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Thanks for showing us Einstein for Flow. Now folks can get a head start in building flows with Einstein and loving repeaters. And thanks for doing a demo on how to configure it and how to use the data from the repeaters, because I know that that's not in the release notes or anything like that. So, and I'm really excited to get my...
I just want to raise it. There is a
Yes.
detailed example in the documentation because we knew that was going to be a more complex part of this feature, is like how to get the data into like the shape that you need it to be in, so that you can take it to whatever system you need it to be taken to. But
Great.
Look out and hope for that.
Awesome. And really excited to get my hands on those future release enhancements. Very excited for that. And thank you for the tips on naming the components that you use in repeater so that you can easily find them. So I'm going to keep that in mind as well. So thanks for that. Now we're going to move on to Adam. So we have even more enhancements to see, and I'm going to have Adam take it away.
Sounds good. All right. So first I'm going to start off with some slides to highlight some of the key points, and then naturally we're going to dive into some flows with a demo and hop into the builder to show off how it was built, because we're in Automate This. So to start things off, the big thing coming from my world is what we call screen actions, and screen actions triggered by what we're calling action buttons. So reactivity was, a huge game changer when we released it, but it did have one little Achilles heel, and that is you didn't always have the data that you needed on the same screen. And that's where screen actions come in. Screen actions allow you to go and fetch data using an auto launched flow to bring back into your screen. That way you don't need to install any custom components. You don't need to go to the next screen. Keeps your users all on the same screen. So prime example here is select an account, get the contacts for that account, get the opportunities for the account, get the contacts cases, all on one screen. You could also do things like callouts and return results from a pricing API. Anything you can do in an auto launch flow, you can do from an action button. So really exciting stuff. And next release, we're going to be adding a progress indicator, because it's kind of strange that you click a button, it doesn't actually disable or have any sort of indicator that it's running. Adding some builder guardrails to make sure that your flows work properly, and then adding the ability to disable the button before inputs are ready to go. So as part of, As part of that, it's very important for choices to be reactive. Now, choice options were made reactive, I think last release, so you could change the default selection, but the actual options themselves were static. So as part of this, we're delivering what we're calling dynamic or reactive choice options. So if you have an action button run, it will write to a collection, and then you can use a collection choice set that changes based off of that action's results. So here I have an example that I'm about to show in our demo, where we call out to the USPS API and return a bunch of shipping options for a given product dimensions and zip code. So really powerful stuff, because people have been asking for the ability to dynamically create choice options for a very long time, and I'm very excited to deliver this. And then lastly, a very popular one, the address component had a lot of quirks and limitations, I think, over its lifespan. And last Dreamforce, we had some feedback that it was kind of strange that it didn't work with state and country pick list. And I think we all agreed. It actually, you would run into situations where you'd hit errors, where if you had a state code or a country code that didn't match what you had in your system, you'd get errors when you actually tried to create a record or to update a record. So we looked at it, we made some pretty drastic improvements, and we was like, well, while we're in there, let's see if we can add a few more things to it. So we went in and added the address lookup, so you can now search for addresses and quickly fill out fields. And we added the ability to require fields and disable fields based off of criteria on the same screen. And when you combine it with reactivity, it allows you to do some pretty cool stuff, which I'll also show in my demo. All right, so one thing that I love to do for my demos with reactivity is showing what life was like before reactivity. So what I have here is a not reactive flow from the olden days, or how a lot of folks are building flows today. So our situation here is we are a support agent, and we field product returns to send off to the product return team. So we get a call, we got to match the contact, we got to figure out which order they had, and create a return for that order for someone else to handle. So our first step in this type of process is usually where you try to match a caller to a contact. Now we have lots of out-of-the-box ways of doing this. For the purposes of this demo, I thought I would use action buttons to share that use case. So let's say that person's name is Tess Robertson. We just wanted to start basic. So we hit next. We see that there's two Tess Robinsons. I'm not quite sure which person this is. So we'll try and get more information about them. Oh, cool. Well, we got lucky here. This is the right person. They have the right cases, the right order number. So we got lucky here, but could have taken multiple screen bounces back and forth to get this one right. So we'll set up our case info here. We see that they do have that order with the right products that we're looking to return. So we'll just say like return for a product 2 or widget 2, brief description. And we pick a case priority. I don't really know if it's a critical or a high or a medium. And I also don't really know what support tier I should be assigning this to. So we'll just say it's critical and I don't know, tier 2 sounds good? Sure. And we then return all of the widgets tied to that person's orders. And so they're calling about widget 2, so we select widget 2. We go to the next screen and we get information about that selected product here. So that looks right. Then we try to use we'll just say our older address component where we display that contact's shipping address. And we just say that the billing address, we confirm with them that their billing address is the same as their shipping because we might have to charge them for shipping. So nothing really happening here, right? We're just checking a box, not super special or terribly useful in some situations. So then we make a call out. This is actually an actual call out to the USPS API. So based off of the dimensions of the product, the weight, and the zip code, we get a list of the different shipping options. We'll select one and we'll create our case. So depending on how much bouncing around that agent needed to take, it could have taken anywhere between a minute to 5 minutes, right? Kind of a frustrating experience if you've got to go back and forth. Now, let's see what we can do with everything that we have done thus far up to spring with reactivity. So we'll try this again. Same search term. We're going to search for the contact. Now we keep them on the same screen with an action button. We search the system for the name, the full name. We're not quite sure which contact it is. For this one, I'll just select the second one this time. We see that there's no cases, no orders. So let's try this one. Oh, great, we found them. No need to bounce around between screens. Perfect. So then we'll scroll down here. Same fields, but a slightly different experience. So widget 2 return. Please help them return the widget. Now watch what happens here. Notice how I've disabled the lookup because I don't actually want them to be able to select the case owner. I want to be able to dynamically show that to them as they're filling out the form. So anything that's low, medium, or high, I assign to tier 1. But if they select critical, I'll assign it to tier 3 support. This is all using reactivity. And then we have them select the widget that they need to return. So we'll select widget 2. And then we need to set up the return. So this is where we actually need to get more information about that product from that order. So we'll display it in some read-only fields here. This is also new in this release. So we got a read-only text field and read-only number fields. And now we get into our new address component features. So we're fine with the shipping address here. It looks right, but we could search for a new one with our new lookup functionality. So if we could quickly fill that out. And one cool thing that we can do here, now when you select billing address is the same as shipping, we can disable these fields because we don't expect them to touch it. So when you disable something, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind for the user. And then I have another reactivity rule set such that if we uncheck this, we require it, which is kind of nifty too. So we'll denote that these are required. If we uncheck it, we'll just go ahead and disable it. So now at the bottom with some reactive display text at the bottom, we have a reference to the selected product. So we know that it's 3 pounds and then the destination. So if, for some reason we were able to change this zipping code, the zip code, it would real-time update down here. And so then we call out to our USPS API and get those shipping rates. And we'll create the case. All right, so let's see how we built this. So this was the flow beforehand. And I have to say this actually, pardon the lack of fault paths, but another thing that actually makes this probably slightly cleaner than it probably would be normally is the use of these subflows. But you can see here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screens without the reactivity happening, right? So this is what it would look like with reactivity, a single screen. So we took 5 screens really, because one was a success screen, down to 1. And now that's like drastic, right? So I'm going to show you how we built this. So I'll probably avoid some of the more basic stuff. So I did, like I looked to get all the queues in the system to populate my lookup. but I'm really just going to hone in on the new stuff here, and I'm happy to answer questions afterward of how I did it. So this is what an action button looks like when it's configured. It's anyone that has really set up a subflow before will feel right at home here. So it's the exact same method of setting up a subflow because they are auto launch flows. So we'll dive in here. This is one that's already configured. We use the same UI as the subflow UI, although we did add some extra sugar to show the outputs. This is something that not subflows can't do, but I would love to add in the future. So this actually shows what this will output and what you can reference elsewhere in the screen. And you'll see that we take one input, which is this search term. So if I open up the flow, I could do it from here, but I already have it open. It's a pretty basic one. So all this does is we look at the contacts that match the search term. So we let them put in the email address or the name. So if any of those match, we return the records and we assign it to output. So a little best practice for you. I like to name my variables with input and output. It keeps things clean. And I have a little fault message here that you could configure however you want to display to the user if there's an error. All right, and so how did I do the next table? So this was the actual table itself that returned the results. So the way that you reference an action button is through this category that we created called Screen Actions. So you'll see here, there's a new category called Screen Actions. So you would drill in, you click Results, and this results shows all the outputs for your flow. And so we would just simply reference your found contacts here. And then boom, that's it. So one thing I like to do is conditionally hide things until the action runs. So the way that you would do that, and I'll clear this out, we would drill into our screen action again, search for contacts. There's an output called is success for any screen action. So if it succeeds, it would be true. If it fails, it's false. So here I just show the table whenever it successfully runs. And so in my next button, based off of the contact that we select in this table, and we call this chaining internally, you're chaining different results on the same screen. Based off of the first selected row, which is the contact ID, we pass this into a generically built subflow that we could use. And we can see it does a whole bunch of stuff down here. It returns the cases for the contact, the order products, the orders, and the contact record itself. So maybe you needed to get more details about that selected contact from a lookup field, for example. So this is what that one looks like. It's a little more complicated because I chose to go with a more generic route so that I could potentially reuse this in other flows, right? So I do some fun stuff where I look to see if there's a single ID passed in or if it's multiple. Yours doesn't have to be this complex. I just chose to make it a little more complex to be more modular and reusable. And we get that person's cases, we get their orders, and their products on those orders as well. And I have a little fault path here to output any potential fault messages. And likewise, down here is where we actually reference all those things like we did above. So we've got our cases, we have our orders. And here, and this isn't necessarily new to this release, is where we actually set our default value based off of the priority. So I have disabled as true. So this part actually is new. We just don't ever want them to change this lookup. So we just set it to true. And I'll dive into the actual formula here just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So if the case priority button is critical, we use the developer name of the queue that we're expecting. This could be a custom label, custom setting to be more scalable, but for the demo, I just use the static value. So if they select critical, it's tier 3. Anything else would be tier 1. And that is what we use in our default value of our choice. Right here. So then we have everything that we need to set up our return. So this outputs the contact, the product. We could have done this above, but just for the sake of the demo. So this is where we actually use the outputs in our address component. So just to highlight a few of the new things, if you have state and country pick list enabled, you'll get two new outputs and inputs, the state or country code and the state code and the country code. These are the actual outputs that you want to use if you're using state and country pick lists in your org. Otherwise, you could hit a potential error. And down here, we have our Google Maps search field. So you have to actually set this to true to get the new search experience. And then you can also provide a label for it if you wanted to change what a user sees right above it. And then up here, we have our required and disabled attributes and inputs that you can set. And these can be static or reactive, depending on what you need. And then down here, we have our references to other things on the screen. So we have our dynamic weight and our postal code. And then we have, honestly, what took me the longest time with this demo was actually building the call out to USPS, which I'm actually working on a blog post for. I'll probably put it up on either Unofficial SF or through our admin blog on how I actually achieved this, because a lot of what took me so long wasn't actually the flow building part. It was figuring out all the quirks of the USPS API. But I eventually figured it out, and we got it working for the demo. So it takes in a destination zip, height, length, weight, and width. And then what I do is I output a collection of Apex types that we then put into a bunch of choices. And so actually, I'll share in the blog post, but what I ended up doing was, due to the structure of the API, I had to do some fun concatenation to get different fields put into the choices. So fun demo overall. I really enjoyed putting it all together and learning about all the quirks of the USPS API. All right, so back to some slides. So just to summarize some of those quick tips and tricks, make sure you're using that isSuccess output to drive a bunch of different things, right? You can use it to conditionally display and hide components. You can actually use it to require that a user click a button to retrieve results. So if you mark like a text input as required, you could put input validation in to ensure that the action was successful. You can also disable components until the action runs. So if you wanted to restrict a user from actually editing a field until they run an action, you could do that too with it. So pretty cool. All right, so what do we have coming on the reactivity front and then some other cool ScreenFlow features? Well, I kind of hinted at it in the very beginning of what I was most excited about. So button actions, screen actions are kind of like phase one of these really cool screen actions. Phase two are something very similar to, I see Josh Damon's already in the chat, but something that he built called Data Fetcher, which allows you to basically fetch data real time on your screen. The way his works is it's basically what we call a headless component that just sits silently in the background and looks for changes in your screen and hits the database, but you got to use SOQL to do it. We want to make these screen actions automatic based off of what's passed into it. So like imagine here where you're typing in a case subject, you could run a flow automatically to do that same thing, which is going to just be, I think, mind-bogglingly cool, and I'm really excited about it. Similarly, we want to make input validation run without you needing to hit next. I've definitely experienced this in the real world, and I know that a lot of you experience this pain in your flows too. Having users needing to click next to get inputs to validate is frustrating when you've got really big forms with a lot of fields, only to encounter, maybe your first field was invalid. So we want to actually show these errors real time to users. Combining these two things together just opens up so many cool possibilities. Like imagine you're typing in an email address and we have an input validation running a screen action that says, hey, there's already an email address in the system without needing to actually hit next. So just a lot of really, really cool use cases that we can do with these two things together. And we know that data table needs some love. We're going to be coming back around next to make sure that data table can use Apex types, external data. So we know that data table cannot display external data, and we want to bring that into data table next. And some other cool stuff, we know that to show a progress indicator, you have to create an LWC or an Aura component to show where a user is on the screen. And we want to make that easy and much easier without needing to create any sort of custom components. And we also know that people want more control over what the header is in their flow, right? So right now you can only show the flow label, which we know isn't meeting a lot of people's needs. So we want to provide more granularity for that in the future. And that's all for me, Jen. Back over to you.
Thanks, Adam. Love the action buttons. I already had a chance to play with it. I've also used the read-only disable state, so loving that, and can't wait to see all the really cool things that you have coming on. So thanks for that presentation. All right, so I see a lot of questions already in queue. So just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, start it with a Q colon so I could easily locate that for our Q&A, and let's get into it. All right, so before we get started, I want to say hi to Christy Campbell, since she said hi to me. And I want to acknowledge folks that are joining across the United States: Florida, California, Ohio, Virginia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and we have global people. I love it. In India, Brazil, Nigeria, Canada, Mexico. Thank you all for attending Automate This. All right, so let's get into it. And we'll start with our first question from Kellen Kirby. With repeaters, after a user adds all of their contact fields and number of contacts entered, how do you loop and check to make sure that the names entered in the repeater do not already have a contact record?
It's a great question. As you saw in the roadmap, it's something we want to make a lot easier to allow you to deal with existing data. Something that I didn't mention is another team that is not the ScreenFlow team is also looking at Upsert. So this is all very safe harbor, but with luck in this year, at some point in this year, you'll be able to take the results of a repeater and, be able to say, I want to match based on the contact name or something else that we know is unique. And if that already exists, I want to use these to update that record. And if it doesn't, I want to create it. As of today, that's going to have to be handled in your own processing within that loop of you would have some way of identifying, do I already have this record, which is going to be doing some annoying queries inside of a loop, which we know can lead to you hitting your limits. So I would just say kind of tread carefully with this use case for now. The way that repeaters is intended in its GA state is to help you with creating records. We don't yet have a very good way for you to be able to identify duplicates, but we are working on it.
Thank you. All right, next question is from Christy. Will the redirect to the record you created in the flow be a thing in the future? Otherwise, how do I get Sam's small bit of code?
Oh yeah, I posted in the chat, and other people mentioned it also, but I was actually using the navigate anywhere action on unofficial SF. But Adam, would you like to comment?
Yeah, that's actually something I'm drafting up right now. So we're hoping to work on that next year for sure. We know it's just such a critical use case to be able to navigate a user to a newly created record, or maybe you're in the midst of a screen and you need to send them off to another tab, something like that. So we know that navigating users is a very common use case, and we're definitely going to be working on that one for sure. We know the pain.
All right, our next question is from John for Sam. Could you have used transform rather than looping on the repeater collection?
Oh, I so wish. You probably saw on the roadmap that is something that we really want to do. It's kind of sitting in my sort of stretch list for the work that we're doing this release. So I'm hoping that within the next couple of releases, we should be able to have that functionality. It's going to streamline the process of processing the downstream parts of your repeater so much easier, especially when you have straightforward use cases.
Great. All right. And our next question is from Christy. If the action from one of the steps in your widget returns a reactive process fails, how do you handle that if it's all in one screen?
Yep, good question. So whenever there's an error, there's an error message that pops up, well, not up, but under the actual button component. And if you wanted to do something different, you could always output a message. Now, finer tuned error handling is something that I'm definitely looking at. I don't think it's going to make it for GA of action buttons, but one thing I do want to do is be able to override the error that we give. Love to hear potential errors that you might encounter and how you might want to override that error message that we provide, but certainly high on my list of things to address.
Great. Next question is from John. Are you planning to add the includes operator for multi-pick list field inside a decision element?
Do you want me to take it, Sam?
It's more you than me.
Yeah, it's all it's the same deal. Actually, I would argue that it needs to be in more places than just decision. I think it also needs to be in like the get records element as well. So I'll just take that as meaning we need includes, because I don't really think it's anywhere in Flow. I'm not aware of any teams working on that right now, but I would certainly love to see that. And I would encourage you to, I'm pretty sure there already is an idea exchange idea for that. Certainly vote for it and get your friends to vote for it, because I agree. I would love to see it. Now, you'll also get some pushback from other admins just in general about multi-selects, because we all know multi-selects are our special snowflake in the platform. So we'll either way, it's a reality that they're there, so we need to support it. But I would definitely encourage you to vote for it.
Yeah. In the meantime, I believe our documentation guides you to use the includes formula function to help with this, since we have the gap. So it should be possible with a little more tedium than we would like.
Next question comes from Ajay Pret. Can you bring away like the progress bar to be clickable, so that if there are multiple screens, users in the flows can move directly from screen 1 to say screen 5 without clicking next?
I will take this. So 2 things. One, we are planning to bring an out-of-the-box progress indicator to flows that are using stages soon. However, what this is asking for is beyond what we are planning. We think of this as jump navigation, like the ability to use the progress indicator to actually navigate your flow. We believe that we will be able to solve that in the future. It's not part of the initial plan for our out-of-the-box progress bar. We are thinking about it. We think that it will be straightforward for us to do backwards navigation using the progress indicator to like start on step 5 and go all the way back to step 1. But forward navigating through the progress bar is going to be very difficult, because especially with how complicated screens now are, and even without that, like there are actions potentially between screens, there are like records being created, there's validation happening. We're worried about like being able to ensure that jumping from screen 1 to screen 5 is, you're going to have valid data by the time you get to screen 5. So that's just something we need to try to carefully on. I would really like, particularly with this one, I would love to get more info about how the flows you would like to use this for work. So I would love to hear from you on idea exchange about this.
Thanks. And our next question comes from Antonio. When will Flow support running case assignment roles? I created a screen flow using a repeater for cases, but it assigns me as the owner instead of the queue the cases should be assigned to.
Yep. This one has been like this. It's the dawn of Process Builder, which is one of those things that we think we'd love to get to and just bake into, like the Create element. I would encourage you there's reusable Apex App Exchange products that you can use. They're fairly basic to just make sure that any case assignment rules will run. So if you're not a consultant and you have an org of your own, I would just install the action and just kind of be done with it. It is something that I think we wish was kind of baked in, but it's just one of those things that we'd love to have you create a idea exchange idea on if it doesn't already exist. I'm fairly sure that one does too. But yeah, I would go the App Exchange route. Sure, there are free options out there that I've seen.
Yeah, this is one of those, because there isn't heavy investment happening in that area. The best way to help us get it prioritized is to get those idea exchange votes up as high as possible. Because that can help us we always raise these kinds of things with our leadership, but as we were talking about earlier, we can't always do all the things that we want to do with limited resources and other things going on. Yeah.
And I'm going to sneak one more question in from Montgomery. Are you able to reference the current loop iteration within a repeater? For example, if I wanted to dynamically load specific text into each repeater based on if it's the first, second, or third item added.
Yeah, not currently. I would love to hear from Montgomery a bit more about the use case, because we were thinking about adding an iteration identifier, but what we really need is some more detailed use cases in order to make it worth investing the time to add that in. So yeah, would really love to hear more detail about what you want to do with this.
Great. So we have more questions than we have time for. If we didn't get to your question today, please go out to the Trailblazer community, to the Salesforce Automation Trailblazer group, and ask your question there, and then we'll find experts to answer those questions. So before we wrap, I do want to ask you all a question. Is that Flonatic shirt? We've had community members ask about it. How do they get it?
We now have a Flonatic shirt up on the Amer store. So you just go to this lovely QR short code that Jen created, and just order your stuff. I don't know how good the stock is because we just talked about it yesterday at RRL, and they may be sold out now, but we are keeping an eye on that. We have already alerted the providers that you should add a bit of extra stock because we're about to announce this at a bunch of cool webinars. But yeah, and then we are also talking with them about getting it be made available to the other regional stores, APAC and EMEA. So keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. All right. So let's recap what you learned in today's episode. We nerded out on Summer 24 enhancements for screen flows, and Sam and Adam gave us a deep dive into repeaters, action buttons. Always love some demo action. And who doesn't love roadmaps? So can't wait to play with those cool things once those are delivered. So join me next month with Trailblazers Nancy Brown and Save Khalid on June 26th. So Nancy will show us how she created a way for her client to easily test scheduled flows in lieu of waiting for the scheduled flow time. And Safe will show you how he built a customized system email notification solution using Flow. So, subscribe to the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel to be aware of the new content. And now it's your turn. If you missed the Flow release readiness session that was yesterday, check out the video on demand and find out more about the other Flow enhancements coming in Summer 24. Check out the amazing action button deep dive blog post that Adam wrote, available on admin.salesforce.com, and start building your action buttons today. And lastly, hit the trail. Complete the reactive components resources trail mix to learn more about reactivity in ScreenFlows. And check out my other YouTube series, How I Solved It, where we take one business problem and show how one awesome admin chose to solve it. We've dropped 4 episodes so far with Carrie Webster, who you see here, Eric Mall, Kim Strauss, and this month's puppy episode with Brandon Walton. Yes, you heard me right. I said puppies. So check out the playlist and watch the episodes and past ones. And get great content produced for you admins. Visit our website, admin.salesforce.com, to find the latest blogs, podcasts, and videos. Listen to the Salesforce Admins podcast hosted by Mike Gerholt, where you get your podcast content. And watch past episodes of Automate This via our playlist on the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel. And join me in New Orleans next month. I'm super excited to be attending and presenting at my first Dreamin' in Color conference. I will be presenting Elevate Your User Experience with ScreenFlows on Thursday at 2. So if you're attending, please attend the session and stop by and say hi. And thank you so much, Sam and Adam, for coming on Automate This and sharing these amazing ScreenFlow features with us.
You're welcome anytime.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. And thank you to all of you for joining us for Automate This. And I look forward to seeing you at future sessions. And remember to set the reminder on the live stream episode page, and we'll communicate upcoming sessions on our various social channels on X at Salesforce Admins, NoI, LinkedIn, and the Trailblazer community.